right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into our positions so that we can get started. And thank you so much for coming this afternoon. And let me say it's day 2 of the African Investment Forum Market Days. And I believe that you've had the opportunity to experience and witness the deal making that's been going on here, and of course attending some of the sessions themed around the various sectors that are being covered by the African Investment Forum Market Days 2022. And I believe also as members of the press, you've had time to interact with project sponsors, with investors, and of course with the founding partners of the African Investment Forum. They are all here, 8 partners of them. And if I may just recap who we have here, we've got representatives from the African Development Bank group that is led by Dr. Akiwumi Adesina. We've got Professor Benedict Orama, President of the African Export and Import Bank, or Afrexim Bank. We've got Malam Samailu Zubeiru, the CEO of Africa Finance Corporation. We've got the CEO of Africa 50, Alain Ebobise. We've got Mohan Vivekanandan, the Group Executive, Origination and Coverage. That's the Development Bank of Southern Africa. We've got Musa Nakolima, who is from the European Investment Bank. We've got Hani Salem Sonbo, who is there representing the Islamic Development Bank. And we've got the Senior Director of the Africa Investment Forum, Chinelu Anahu, before you. So how are we going to run this? Because I know we are pushed for time. We've got exactly 1 hour. We are going to give our principals 2 minutes each to touch on some of the issues you've been hearing about investment opportunities in Africa. How do you bridge the investment gap, particularly on infrastructure? How do you overcome the stereotypes and negative perceptions that are making investors to shy away from the continent? And of course, what's been happening in the boardrooms? They may be able to give you a sneak preview, but a lot of that will be unveiled tomorrow. And when I come to you, ladies and gentlemen of the press, what I'll expect you to do is to be brief and direct to the point. Ask your one question, we'll pass on the microphone to another, we'll take the questions in batches, and then we'll let the principals answer. And I will try my level best to make sure I am spreading the love across the table. So I would like us to get started because we've got exactly 1 hour. And what I'll do is to call on Dr. Adesina to be the first to give us his 2 minutes of his remarks. Dr. Adesina.
Oh, thank you very much. Let me welcome you all to this press briefing. First, let me start by telling you how grateful we are to all of you, the press, for coming from around the world and for being here to cover this event since we started. I've seen so many of you in the hallway. I've seen you within the meetings. I've seen a lot of interviews going on. Thank you for helping us to tell the story of Africa, helping us to tell the story of a resilient continent, helping us to tell the story of our collective efforts to put our resources, our minds, our political leadership around this continent to recover not only from COVID-19, but to thrive and to prosper beyond that. We, as you see us all around here, are partners for the Africa Investment Forum. We do it because we believe in Africa. We do it because we believe in Africa's potential. We do it because we want to turn that potential into stupendous amount of wealth for this continent. As I said in my opening remarks to you yesterday, foreign direct investment in Africa had declined. It went down from $47 billion in 2019 down to $40 billion in 2020 because of COVID-19. But voila, in 2022, it went back double to what it was in 2020, to $83 billion. So this Africa Investment Forum is talking about resilience, economic resilience of our continent. We believe in the continent, that's why we're here, and you're here because you also believe in the continent. I will save the rest of the details for your questions But right now, all I just want to say is that you have been a great part of this. Last year, we were actually sitting here when Omicron hit, and we had to actually postpone the event because of that. But today, as I look around, there are nobody wearing masks and so on. So it's fine that we finally are getting over that. But one thing is clear, that Africa's investment potential remains the same. It's high population, young population of its youth, huge amount of resources, natural resources, blue resources, blue economy. We also have a lot of renewable energy potentials that we have. So basically, we are here to make sure that we accelerate investment in Africa. And thank you very much for your partnership as members of the press. We look forward to your questions. Thanks for being here and welcome again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for that, Dr. Deshina. Let's hear from Professor Rama, please.
Thank you very much. And let me begin by thanking our dear brother, Dr. Adesina, President of the African Development Bank, dear sister Chinelo, and the entire team at the AIF for bringing back the AIF physically. The AIF, when it started, of course, all of us believed it was a very, very good and impactful initiative. But we never knew how impactful it could be until we started engaging and we started doing what we are doing. Just under 3 years, it has become the true marketplace for investments on the continent. There is no project that is what is named that does not feature in the boardroom here. And I can talk for ourselves at Flexing Bank. I know quite a number of projects that would have been extremely difficult for us to complete, but became much easier because of the AIF. And as we move on from what we have and look ahead, one sees this as something that collectively as a continent we must nurture into something that stands on its own feet, because this is clearly Africa taking its destiny in its hands. This is Africa taking control of its narrative. This is Africa bringing the projects that it wants, not the projects others want it to do. We bring those projects, and those who want to invest come. And Mr. President just mentioned how foreign direct investment doubled. And sure, it didn't double by chance. It's partly because of the work that is being done, the AIF. So I also like to thank our colleagues, the other partners, for the partnership that is keeping this alive. Our African partners, we give less thanks because we all need this. But our foreign partners, we will give even bigger thanks because they are real partners, looking into Africa in the way that Africans want people to look at them. So thank you very much again, Mr. President. Chinelo, thank you. And also through you, Mr. President, to the entire team at the AIF for making this possible and creating this institution that I'm sure would outlive all of us. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Professor Rama. And as you can see, the story is so sweet to tell. Sometimes it's difficult to keep within those 2 minutes. But let me go to the CEO of Africa Finance Corporation, Zubair.
Hello, thank you very much. I would like to join my colleagues in thanking the press, and everybody here for being here and giving us the support. And also to thank the President of AFDB, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, and the organizing Senior Director, Chinelo, as well as the entire team for the work that has come to bringing us all here today. So again, this is another initiative that demonstrates Africans taking ownership of the opportunities and challenges that face us. And like my colleague, Professor Orama, mentioned, this is something that we thought of as an idea when we started this in 2018. And it is an idea that has taken life. It has wings and is flying now. And it's also a platform for us as the founders for engaging on important topics that we think we should focus on as leaders of the platform. In our meetings yesterday morning, we discussed a couple of important initiatives around growth for our continent, around the priorities for investments, and around the kind of consensus that we should have as leaders, including talking to heads of states of various African countries on the things to prioritize. Here in the boardrooms, in the deal rooms, and in all the activities leading up to this, we continue to focus on how we can help our continent structurally transform. How can we make the investments that will allow us have more value capture from our resources? How can we do more value addition for the resources on the continent in a way that we can create jobs for the continent? We recognize that Africa is a very important part of the solution now for most of the challenges facing the globe, and we are looking at how to make the investments, that will actualize that. So I'll just stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zubairu, for that. Yes, of course, Africa being part of a solution for all these global problems. And now next is Vivekanandan from the Development Bank of Southern Africa.
Good afternoon, everyone. And again, thank you very much for the AFDB for bringing us all together in person. It makes a real difference to be here, to be able to focus on the mission here, which is really about the transactions, the developers, the sponsors who've put in years of hard work, sweat and tears to bring forward these projects that will make a significant impact in the lives of people on the continent. We, as the Development Bank of Southern Africa, our mandate based out of Johannesburg in South Africa is to promote sustainable infrastructure and do that in order to drive economic growth, to improve the quality of life for people on the continent. And the work that we do today and in this time is really at the heart of the work that all of us do as development banks, which is ultimately about ensuring that ideas with the finance that we bring come to fruition. So it's critical work, and it's just lovely to be able to be here after 2 years, in person, to be able to engage on these elements. One of the critical items I also want to just talk through is the fact that certainly in Southern Africa, where we're from, the region has lagged economically. We haven't done enough to uplift the people of the region. And part of that has been the fact that there's been a focus on public sector-led growth and public sector-led investment. And it hasn't really had the meaningful impact, the delivery that we've needed. And I think one of the critical elements of the work that we do and the work that's happening with our partners at the AIF is around the fact that there is very much a focus also on ensuring investment from the private sector, whether on the equity side or on the debt side, to make sure that we've got the right projects that are focused on real needs, which ultimately will create jobs, drive the industrialization of the continent, but do it in a way that's also sustainable. Because I think, as we can all admit, the continent, the world is in a very challenging position financially. The recent rises in interest rates are making it very challenging to continue to drive public sector growth. So we really need to find ways to unlock the potential, the skills that are there in the private sector on the continent and also globally to answer the challenges and the opportunities that are here in the continent.
Thank you so much, Vivekanandan, for that. And before I leave this part of the table, I just want to recognize one of the leaders I didn't mention when I did the introduction, and that is Admasi Tedesi, the President Emeritus and CEO of Trade and Development Bank. Next to Vivekanandan is the Senior Director of the Africa Investment Forum, Chinelo Anoho.
Thank you very much, Solomon, for the introduction. And just a few 2 cents because our partners are here and I would like really to hear from them. I just want to say that it's a very long journey to this place, but extremely fulfilling. This was President Adesina's idea, and he brought in partners to work with him in this idea. And what a lot of the successes recorded by the Africa Investment Forum is domiciled in that spirit of partnership. Everybody providing their particular area of expertise to push the projects forwards to fruition. President Adesina has been consistent in his support in the pillars of the AIF, especially the women-led pillars, and how he puts the women forward and ensures that we have the resources necessary to deliver on the projects. It's the beginning, but it's a very bright beginning, and a very hopeful one. And as the next 2 days will unfold, the projects just get better, the interests just get more nuanced to the challenges and needs of the continent. So I thank you very much, the press who are here, without whom our stories would not be told appropriately. And the deals continue. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Chinelo. Let me now go to the other side of Dr. Adesina. Let me bring in now Ebobisse from Africa 50.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me also thank Dr. Adesina, President of the African Development Bank, who's also my chairman at Africa 50, for his vision for creating the Africa Investment Forum, and also, as Chinelo said, bringing together partners ready to work with the African Development Bank to achieve, to implement this vision. I think the world is facing several challenges. You know, the inflation, currency volatility, the war in Ukraine, etc. And all of these challenges result in a shrinking fiscal space from governments, including in our continent. That means what? That means that the private sector has to step up and to do a lot more to achieve our development goals. And that's why the African Investment Forum is a timely platform to make sure that we can speed up the implementation of private sector-led projects and scale up those projects. So this is timely, and we see that today, despite the crisis, that there is an increased level of activity, at least from my own observation. Hopefully the numbers will confirm that at the end of tomorrow, we'll see. But I pick up quite a bit of activity, consistent with the fact that the private sector has to step up. From our own pipeline of projects, we were able to advance projects here, having meetings in boardrooms and also in side meetings where we talked with project sponsors, government officials, to move things forward. This is what the Africa Investment Forum is all about, getting things done, unlocking issues on projects so that we can move projects faster to financial close, to construction. And once again, the African Investment Forum, at least so far, is confirming those expectations. So thank you again for the press for telling that story, the story of things that are happening here on the continent, because there are a number of things happening. We need to talk about the positive narrative of what's happening in Africa without hiding some of the challenges. But let's talk about what is happening, which is positive. Thank you.
Telling a wholesome story. Thank you for that. Ebobisse, let me move on to Admasu from Trade and Development Bank.
Thank you very much, MC. Just to echo what my esteemed colleagues have said, we're all very happy indeed to be back. AIF is 4 years strong and still moving very nicely, and of course the context is what has changed. We're here to build on what we've been doing over the past years, but the world around us has really changed. And so we're here to make sure we continue doing business in this very changed world that we're all living in. That said, I think we've had some excellent encounters at this AIF, new prospective clients, but also pouring some fuel on existing deals that are taking a little bit longer to close. But we're building up the momentum and trying to be very real about it. So look forward to any potential questions from the floor. Thank you.
Yeah, firing things up and getting them onto the front burners. Thank you so much for that. Tadesse, let me now move on to the Islamic Development Bank, and we've got Hani Salem Sonbol. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And I also would like to add my voice to thanking His Excellency, the President of the African Development Bank, and also my colleagues here and partners. IDB Group, the Islamic Development Bank, since inception as a founding member of the AIF, believe that this kind of really forums that can bring immediate impact to face the challenges. Today we are tackling a very important theme, which is the building economic resilience through sustainable investment. I think this is very important, especially during this period of time. And we definitely will continue to be committed to the AIF, and will also help to translate all the tangibles, measures and outcomes that comes from this meeting. This meeting is so distinguished in a way that we feel that going directly to what is really impacting people, doing the deals instead of just as we say talk. Here is the place where you can identify what is good for the continent, and I'm sure that it's a privilege for IDB Group all the time to be here with this very highly respected partners. I would like also to say that we are looking forward to also see the materialize all what we have seen in the few days into actions, and me and my team will definitely focus on that. Also, we are expecting this year that this is very important year for the forum. There are a lot of focused discussions on very key important priorities for the continent, talking about the food security, the energy, the environment. The IDB Group will continue to be committed for the well-being of Africa as usual. It's in the heart of all of our strategies, and I thank you again for your listening. I'm ready to answer any questions related to our business. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Sonbul. And last but not least, Musana Kolima from the European Investment Bank.
Thank you very much, and very delighted to be here representing the European Investment Bank, the EIB. Thank you very much to Chairman Dr. Adesina for organizing this AIF. I'm very happy to represent the EIB's president, Dr. Werner Hoyer, and I would like to convey the message that at the EIB, as a founding partner of this fantastic platform, we believe that this edition is all the more timely, all the more instrumental after a difficult couple of years that we went through. And after pandemic of COVID, and now more recently the war in Ukraine, gathering all the partners around the table and with the private sector actors is extremely critical. The EIB is a long-term partner of Africa, and since the mid-60s we have been active on the continent, and we believe that now and for the near future it is extremely important for us to increase our action and our investment in Africa, supporting private sector, because the pandemic also showed us that the main vessel for growth is not public sector, but it's private sector. So this is where our efforts should be channeled through. We intend to provide our technical and our expertise alongside all the partners to support climate action projects, obviously, and we believe that reaching the ambitious goals that are set can be only carried out through strong partnerships, and this is also what we are here to convey as a message, that we are here to partner and co-finance alongside our fellows around the table and elsewhere. This is only, in our view, the best way to reach and transform all the potential that is within the continent, within Africa, be it from renewable energy, photovoltaic, for instance, in the Sahel region, hydro in the Great Lakes, and also all the very prominent potential that is within the youth in the continent. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that, Musana Kolima. And yes, your point about private sector being at the heart of socio-economic development and the driving force of that economic growth. So, ladies and gentlemen of the press, You've heard it from the principals. Now it's time to come to you. I can now introduce myself. My name is Solomon Mugeram, and I'm the Director of Communication and External Relations at the African Development Bank Group. So I'll come to you now, and I can see some of you have got headphones. Yes, if you want to listen in English or French, there's a button there. Channel 1 is for French, Channel 2 for English, and you can ask your questions in French as well. We've got French speaking principals as well. We've got some of you are sending your questions via online. Please keep them coming. But I want to start from right here in the room with some hands up. Say your name, your organization, and keep it brief. Okay, let's see some hands up. We've got, is there a microphone there? Okay. We'll need to take questions in batches. That way we'll save time. So the gentleman at the back, hold on, and then we'll come to you here, and then we'll come to the gentleman here. Okay.
Thank you very much. My name is Kenneth Igbomo from CNBC Africa. Thank you for the opportunity to ask the question. Well, the past few years have shown that Africa needs to be more deliberate on its development priorities, and it's good to see concerted efforts like the AIF coming together in a time where the world's getting fragmented. But I'd like you to speak to more on the diversity of the deals that we're seeing at this forum this year, and the emerging sectors that are catching the eyes of investors.
Okay, you want to talk about diversity of deals? Let's bring the microphone to the gentleman here in a blue shirt.
Raman Kouferidji, Imali Africa Télévision, au Bénin. Je voudrais, au regard des différentes déclarations, on a fait ressortir la place du secteur privé africain. Je voudrais voir comment les associer beaucoup plus pour qu'ils puissent accompagner cette heureuse initiative que constitue ce forum, qui constitue un champ de mobilisation des capacités internes et faciliter les partenariats publics-privés dans nos différents pays, afin que les projets continentaux puissent prendre en compte la contribution du secteur privé africain. Merci.
Thank you so much, gentleman from Benin. Thank you. We'll take one more here, and then I'll go for some answers.
Good afternoon, Alexis Akwajiran from Semaphore. This question is for Dr. Adesina. If China slows its support for infrastructure projects in Africa, which appears to be the case, what will be the best ways to close the infrastructure gap? And any specific tactics I'm looking for there? Thanks.
Okay, so there's a very clear question there for Dr. Adesina. Then there were two, one from Benin, private sector, you touched on that. I think that will go to Alain Bobise. And then in terms of CNBC, your question about diversity of deals, Professor Rama will handle that. So if we may start with Professor Rama, and then we'll go to Bobis and then Dr. Adesina.
Thank you very much. I think the boardroom is still evolving, but my understanding of the deals that have been brought here is that they are quite diverse, from infrastructure to manufacturing and rising in prominence the creative industry. So we are beginning to see more deals coming up, not only to create the infrastructure for making movies and also for entertainment, but supporting projects that create content. This is unique because it has never happened before. So we are beginning to have that platform where we are even beginning to tap into the knowledge and capacities of our brothers and sisters in the diaspora within the creative content space. And for us at Afrexim Bank, I think some of the projects we brought here in the creative industry. We bring in also, we brought also the first floating LNG for gas in Nigeria. It's a big project that we are doing. I think we also have another project that is in manufacturing. So it's quite extensive and broad, covering everything. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Let's hear from my Bobby on the gentleman's question.
Yeah, thank you. I thought the French question were for my chairman.
No, you go French.
Je vais parler en français. Je vais le faire. Bien sûr, je vais le faire comme mon chairman parle bien. Bon, monsieur, merci beaucoup pour votre question, qui est très importante. D'abord, nous pensons que la participation du secteur privé africain au projet en Afrique est très importante.
In Africa is very important. First and foremost, it is an element where the risk is reduced.
Ça réduit le risque même pour les investisseurs internationaux. Donc, pour nous, c'est très important de toujours rechercher des investisseurs africains qui peuvent participer aux projets que nous finançons. Pour nous, c'est une priorité. En l'occurrence, l'organisation que je dirige, Africa 50, nous avons dans notre portefeuille certains projets donc, qui sont faits par des sponsors africains, notamment un projet de gaz au Ghana, etc. Un autre projet qu'on va annoncer bientôt. Il n'y en a pas suffisamment, il en faut plus. Il en faut plus à l'instar de ce qu'on voit dans les autres régions où, encore une fois, c'est le secteur privé national et régional qui est le mieux à même à faire en sorte que les projets restent sur la durée. Avec les autres, bien sûr, ce n'est pas exclusif, on ne refuse personne, donc c'est très important. Un des challenges qui se pose, c'est que pour les gros projets infrastructures où les montants sont importants, parce que notre capitalisme dans le continent est encore à un stade naissant, quelquefois il n'y a pas suffisamment de sponsors africains qui peuvent participer en financement de leurs fonds propres dans ces très grands projets. Donc, il faut continuer à leur faire la place, mais il faut aussi reconnaître que quelquefois, ils viendront plus tard. Ce que nous essayons de faire aujourd'hui, c'est de faire que les fonds de pension et les fonds souverains africains, qui, eux, ont vraiment des liquidités et qui sont des fonds africains, qui participent un peu plus au financement des projets africains parce qu'on a besoin vraiment d'avoir une vraie assise dans notre continent.
Have a background in our system. So with our chairperson and my good self and others, it is an important subject. Africa will continue to develop itself, but we will only attain sustainability when we have higher participation of African investors in the funding of African industry. We have already started, but we have to do more and faster. This is what I want to say, but we do agree with your viewpoint.
Thank you so much for that, Bobby said, quite detailed, and thank you. I'm sure the gentleman is satisfied. Dr. Deshina, on China.
On?
The gentleman here asked about China. This question on China.
It was not China. Infrastructure gap.
Yes.
Except you want to ask a question on China. Yeah, no. To that, but just d'ajouter de ce que Monsieur BBC vient de dire,
I would just like to add the following. You know, we have a lot of pension funds. We have the sovereign funds in most of our countries. And the amount involved is 2.1 billion of US dollars. But then, please, these funds are invested outside Africa with negative interest rates. So take the case of the pensions fund of Africa to make an investment outside Africa. You recover a negative profitability rate. Even if it is positive, you bring the resources to Africa. Normally, when you are paid for your pension, it's to allow you to have a peaceful retirement. And when you come back, there is no electricity, there is no water and sanitation, there is not enough infrastructure, and also no health facilities. This is not retirement. This is sovereign. So this is the reason why we are saying that the time is ripe enough for us together to pull together our resources to bring together funds of institutional investors. The $2.1 trillion, because if you look at the funding that remains for Africa, it's around 68 to $108 billion per year for infrastructure. This is the deficit to be filled. But then if we can come up with 10% of 2.1 trillion, it means we are talking about $210 billion, and we will cover all the deficit in infrastructure. We will cover all the deficit for energy. So it is very important. But we all know we have already started. We have signed an agreement.
On that. We signed, together with Africa 50, an agreement with the African Sovereign Wealth Funds Forum, which will allow us to take probably about 15 or so sovereign wealth funds in Africa and support them to begin to make investment in infrastructure. We have to see infrastructure as an asset class that they can and they should be investing in. But the issue always is, and I'll just link it to the other question, is when you want to look at that, the question is risk. And as I said earlier in my opening remarks yesterday, you know, if you're a private sector person, the issue is not really risk. The issue is your risk-adjusted return and how you manage risk. I want to say it again. The risk of investment in Africa is over-exaggerated, totally over-exaggerated. The Moody Analytics report for the last 14 years shows very clearly that in times of default on infrastructure loans globally, Africa is the lowest at 5.5%. Latin America, it's about 12.9%. Eastern Europe is about 8-point-something%. Western Europe, a little bit about 5.9%. So we have to also make sure that, yes, we are going to de-risk, but we must not be de-risking bias risk. In other words, perception risk is not what we should be de-risking. We should be de-risking real risks that are there. So that's the other thing I want to say. The other thing I want to add to this is that financing infrastructure also requires that we recognize, and I think my colleagues have said that, it's not just the job of government to do. Today, we are in a situation where the debt situation that is rising for many of the countries, you know, precludes a situation where if the countries keep taking too much debt to do infrastructure, it will only worsen the debt situation for them. So what they need to do is to open up the space to the private sector. And I believe that strongly we must have, at the very minimum, public-private partnerships, allow the private sector in energy, allow them in transport, allow them in rail, allow them in supporting medical infrastructure and so on. Let the private sector space be expanded for infrastructure. And the last thing I'll say on infrastructure is this. Infrastructure, if well done, is like a backbone of your body. And if you do it well, the economy will grow. But we must also recognize there has to be greater transparency, accountability in that space of infrastructure financing. I do not, and the African Development Bank does not support countries using their natural resources to back infrastructure loans, because that is mortgaging the future of those countries. All infrastructure loans should be transparently done, competitively done, the pricing done in such a way that it gives value to those countries. And of course, as you know, infrastructure is always a space that is murky, it's kind of dark sometimes. There must be transparency and there must be efficiency in the use of public resources for infrastructure. Look, yesterday, over lunch, I was talking to President Nana Akufo-Addo, all the other presidents, and I was showing them a road that we had financed in Ghana, which is called the Pokwase Interchange. The Pokwase Interchange was financed by the African Development Bank for $94 million. And it's a 4-tier interchange. It's amazing that you can do something like that for just $94 million. I've had at least almost 8 presidents that have called me, I want to have that. And when we financed Ghana for it, that $94 million was supposed to be for a 3-tier interchange. They made it into a 4-tier interchange with the same amount of resources. So all I'm trying to say is that public financial efficiency in public financing is important. It's not just how much money you're putting into infrastructure, it's the efficiency of that expenditure to be sure that it's being used well. And therefore, I want to ask that, yes, private sector, but let's also get greater transparency and efficiency in the use for infrastructure. And just to add to what Professor Ramos said about the diversity, you know, in addition to what he said, I think we've seen a lot of deals on transport, railway being a big one. We have in the boardroom transport on Western Railway in Kenya, Ghana, for example. Then we also have the railway that will be linking Tanzania to DRC and also to Burundi. It's a big project. We've seen a lot of deals on renewable energy. A lot of those is hydro and solar. We've seen quite a lot of these, as President Rama also said, around the gas issue, as he said, because we really think that gas is also something. We can talk about that later. But all that just to say that the diversity is there, but the investment commitments towards them very strong.
Thank you for that, Dr. Deshina. We've got 2 more questions. I'll go to the lady and the gentleman there, and then I'll go to those questions being submitted via online. So the lady, your name, your organization, and your question, please.
Hello, thank you. My name is Shiko Kimeria, and I'm the Africa editor at Quartz. So my question is really, you know, a lot of the time when we talk about the continent, we talk about the demographic dividend. So the fact that we have all this youth, but there's also the demographic curse, which is a lot of people are still unemployed and all these things that affect them. So I wonder what message you have for this youth that really brings down, because sometimes the discussions we have can feel so theoretical and can feel so high level, but what is a message that you'd pass on to Africa's youth based on the deals that are being discussed or based on this forum? Thank you.
Right, then the gentleman at the gentleman there at the back.
Alain Serge, Le Matin, en Côte d'Ivoire.
Le Matin, Côte d'Ivoire. We all know that the COVID-19 pandemic has shambled everything, and the director, Chileno Anu, I hope I've pronounced your name correctly, has acknowledged it, because he said that COVID-19 pandemic has illustrated the urgent need for Africa to overcome the challenges. Now, what has been done at that level to protect African countries from pandemics that can resurface? And where do we stand when it comes to the construction of a medical and pharmaceutical center in West Africa?
One more question, but as we do that, we'll want to prepare Tadesse to handle the question raised by the lady, and I may come back to Dr. Deshina for the question from Ivory Coast, the Ivorian gentleman there. So one more question here. Nobody's asking questions on this side. What's happening? Okay, the gentleman here, then I'll come back there.
Bonjour, ici Issouf Kamagaté de Financial Afrique.
Kamagaté, Financial Afrique. I would like to know what could be the positive aspects in the various countries following the previous editions of the AIF in face-to-face format.
So I will pass this over. 2 questions in French, Dr. Deshina and Elena Bobby, so you may tackle that as well. Let's start with Tadesse on the question that the lady asked.
Thank you very much for that question. I think it would be fair to say that the issue of youth empowerment and opportunities was top of mind at this edition of the AIF. It was in fact a very key topic raised in the very first opening plenary at the head of state level. And you will have noticed, if you were monitoring some of the different panels, many of the different DFIs are continuing to look to expand the service provision to that particular segment of the population of the continent. So there's a great deal that's been going on. There's a lot of effort to scale up through different types of instruments, not just in the AIF meeting itself, but I think the founding members and the partners here today, all of us are seized with the issue of expanding access to financing to SMEs and to youth and to women as well. There's a number of very exciting programs that are under implementation, and we're all looking to throw our weight behind those objectives to do more. You can perhaps monitor this issue in the years to come to see how much financing has actually been made available to that specific population group. But I think all leaders and a lot of institutions are very sensitive to the need to make progress on the issue of unemployment, but also lack of livelihoods for young people, but also other population groups. It is in our corporate plan for 5 years, and I know the African Development Bank and many of other partners are very strongly focused on that segment as well.
Thank you for that, Tadesse. And let me come now to the two questions. One was about health centers, and I think Dr. Deshini wanted to touch on that before I go to Bobby Singh.
Yeah. You know, one of the things that we all learned from the COVID-19 situation is that Africa can no longer and must no longer outsource the health of its 1.4 billion people to the benevolence of others. We saw during that particular time a particular challenge, which was the rest of the world had first shots, second, third shots, booster shots, and Africa had no basic shots. Today, Africa imports 80% of all of its own pharmaceutical products. It only manufactures 1% of the vaccines on the continent. And yet, the facilities that were set up globally to help us throughout the COVID-19 actually didn't help Africa a lot. We were pretty fortunate to have escaped a lot of those challenges. So my view is that we must have health security, but based on 3 pillars. There must be investment in quality healthcare infrastructure, primary healthcare, secondary healthcare, tertiary healthcare infrastructure. Secondly, there must be investment in pharmaceutical industry so that we can actually produce a lot of our own pharmaceutical products. And third, Africa must produce the vaccines, not only for COVID, by the way. You got malaria, you got all other communicable diseases on the continent by itself. So for us as African Development Bank, we're going to be investing $3 billion in supporting Africa's pharmaceutical industry in these particular areas that I've said. But also when it comes to the issue of investing in infrastructure for health, primary, secondary, tertiary healthcare infrastructure, we plan to invest $3 billion in supporting this particular quality infrastructure for health. Now, let me say that from the African Investment Forum platform, you will see quite a number of projects. In fact, there is a project in Ethiopia, I think it is, that is looking at healthcare, medical centers, like health cities. We have those things that are coming a lot onto the platform for the African Investment Forum. We also look at the manufacturing. I think, Chinelo, it's in Kenya. I think on pharmaceutical lab was in March, looking at the manufacturing of vaccines and so on. So I think we're seeing quite a lot of that. On the question by Financial Afrique, c'est où le Financial Afrique?
Where are you? Where are you, sir? Okay, you are here. Let me respond to you in French. As you know, let me share with you 3 examples. First and foremost, there is the Cocoa Board of Ghana. Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire are the 2 countries that produce cocoa in the world, but then they export. But then, the most rapid way to go about it is to export raw material, because those who are rich are those who process your raw materials. So, the AIF Forum, we with the African Development Bank, with Credit Suisse, we concluded a funding of $600 million for the Cocoa Board of Ghana. And with those funds, they have started increasing their production of cocoa by 1 million additional tons. And furthermore, they have installed a stockage system to protect the quality of the cocoa beans and to avoid the need to sell this immediately after the harvest, which obviously has an impact on your capacity to manage the price. So this is something that is commendable. We are trying to emulate the same thing in Cote d'Ivoire. Secondly is for LNG, liquefied natural gas, for Mozambique. And for Mozambique, this was done thanks to the AIF platform with an amount of $24 billion.
Natural gas project for Mozambique. And we invested from the African Development Bank $400 million into that and several others. That project is going on today, and it will make Mozambique the 3rd largest exporter of liquefied natural gas in the world. And they will add about $66 billion to their revenue. So that's another huge success that we've done that's going on. The third one is coming back to the question that was raised on women, is with the Alethea Fund. That's a fund that's called the Alethea Fund. The Alethea Fund was brought to the Africa Investment Forum for $100 million. We helped them to close the financing gap completely for that. And Alethea Fund will support the businesses of women on this continent with equity investment to drive the businesses. You might have heard the president, the vice president of Liberia, when she said, for businesses of women in Africa should not always be micro, right? We don't want women being given the little things. We want to see big things being done for women businesses. And that's why the Alethea Fund, it's there. So those are the 3 things that I want to say.
Thank you so much. And then Sonbol has raised his hand. He wants to add on to that. Sonbol, please.
Yes, thank you very much. I think just want to compliment what His Excellency President said. You know, in the group, the Islamic Development Bank group, we also have the women and youth actually part of our priority areas, especially for the area of inclusiveness. You know, through the entities, we do have flagship programs for the women and youth in Africa, where we try to provide also integrated solutions for them. You know, we found that financing alone is not going to sometimes help this, help them, a lot. But in fact, we also produce or introduce with the financing as well some solutions, like in terms of capacity building, training, and so on. In areas like in trade, we would like to see the youth also actually do business correctly and rightly, so that's why we have a lot of training programs in addition to line of finance to support their businesses, startups, also incubators. Now we have just finished, for example, 2 very important, programs here in Africa, in North Africa, and now the other one also in Morocco, which is the She Trade program that is really to allow and support millions of women around the continent, to do business and also to be able to cross the borders as well, you know, go to new markets and try to sell their products. I just wanted to add that to what's said. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. And I can see also, Musa, that question seems to have started something in you as well. You've raised your hand up.
Yes, thank you very much. I would just like to add on the second question raised by the press member from Le Matin. I will address it in French. Regarding the pandemic. Donc, en fait, votre question était aussi de savoir ce qu'il y a.
Question, you wanted to know what additional capacity you have in West Africa, if I understood you correctly. Now, to concur with what President Adesina said, which is correct, indeed, the pandemic has shown us that it is important that we ensure sustainability in health sector, namely not to depend exclusively on the external world when it comes to the health of Africans in Africa. For West Africa, there is a center for vaccine production which has been built in Dakar, in Senegal. It was funded by our partners, the investment bank. But before curing, we also should enhance the diagnostic capacities in Africa. And these are interesting sectors for a lot of partners who are involved with other stakeholders who have expressed their interest in the health sector. And all the above is aimed at enhancing the capacities of the health sector and to ensure that the continent is independent on such an important matter.
Mohan, we've got a question here from Dinale, and he wants to look at the situation in Southern and Eastern Africa, but I know you want to restrict yourself to Southern Africa. And he says, what are some of the investments earmarked for Southern and East Africa, particularly in the travel and tourism sectors? Do we have anything along those lines of the AIF?
Sure. You know, obviously as the DBSA, our focus is around Southern Africa. We operate throughout the continent. In terms of our focus has been around various infrastructure projects. So it's been about utilizing infrastructure to unlock opportunities. Some of them, for instance, have been in the airport sector as well to promote travel. You know, we'd worked together previously to invest in airports, for instance, in Madagascar as an opportunity. So specifically, travel and tourism isn't sectors that we focus on because it's more about the infrastructure that enables that. But I think, you know, opening it up to have more private sector opportunities in infrastructure is going to also help to unlock a lot of these sectors as well.
Good. Thank you so much for that. A very quick and sharp answer. I'll come to you, Zubairu. There's a question here from Leo of African Business. And Leo is asking, what is the single biggest hurdle, therefore, to accelerate project execution and the deals flow on the continent?
Thank you. That's a very good question, because part of the challenge that we were created to solve. So the way to accelerate project execution is to develop to de-risk. By that, I mean a framework in which financial institutions like ourselves and the partners here would work with governments and sponsors to understand the project, make the developments required to reduce the risk of the project, make investments in the project ourselves, and then distribute the balance of the funding to other partners. And we've done that severally, and we've tried to adapt that, you know, to market as we go along. So one of the things that we've done is that we've started a program that we call construction finance, which is how do we ensure that we have the project built, you know, depending on the scale of the project, in a way that you are able to appraise the cash flows of the project as opposed to look at the risk of whether the project will even happen or not. So that's something that we do, and we're replicating at scale. So again, very simple answer, develop to the risk.
Thank you so much for that, Zubairu. Dr. Adesina, there's a question here right from the same source, that is Leo of Africa Business, saying you are vocal with the special drawing rights, reallocations. Is this completely off the table, or can we expect SDRs to be channeled through the African Development Bank to help kickstart economic growth and investments on the continent?
Yeah, well, you know, the world is going through all kinds of challenges right now. The big ones, of course, is climate change. We are all going to be in Sharm el-Sheikh talking about that just next week. There is, of course, the COVID-19 situation that we talked about. There is the war in Ukraine and what it has done in terms of energy costs, in terms of food prices, inflation. And you see the world is really reeling on that inflation. And yet we still have the big financing gap for infrastructure that you just got President Simala just talk about just now. Well, the reality is there's not a whole lot of money actually on the table to support developing countries. One of the ways to actually do that is the special drawing rights that IMF has issued. IMF issued $650 billion of special drawing rights, which is the highest it has ever issued, which is good. But the issue is Africa only got 33 billion out of that $650 billion of SDRs. Now, we have been making the case at the African Development Bank, and I've been quite insistent on this, that the special drawing rights, the SDRs, should also be provided to multilateral development banks like ourselves. And the reason is simple. We work very closely with IMF on their growth and poverty reduction trust. I commend the efforts of IMF on their resilience trust that they have, which is great. However, the SDR transactions will be one-to-one transactions. If it comes to multilateral development banks like ourselves, we can actually invest the SDR money. Now, for us, because we are a AAA-rated financial institution, $1 of SDR will become $4 for the countries, or for Africa. So it's a leverage of 1 to 4. So you can see, if you got $10 billion, that becomes $40 billion. If you have $20 billion, that becomes $80 billion. So that's a leveraging impact that is very, very important for the SDRs to complement the efforts of the IMF. And I do think that this is important because as we look at global challenges, we have to ask ourselves the question, what is the best way to optimize the global financial architecture? The global financial architecture, starting from the IMF down to multilateral financial institutions, down to all the development finance institutions you see here. We're not looking for SDRs for ourselves. If we leverage SDR 4 times, that is money we can use to recapitalize and support the Development Bank of South Africa for the great work they are doing, the Africa Finance Corporation, Africa 50, Trade Development Bank, Islamic Development Bank, and others, that, really need this finance in Africa, which is part of the finance in common. So that is very, very important. Now, where are we with it? When we started this conversation, in fact, not many people really wanted to talk about it. Today, I can tell you, the entire multilateral development bank system is behind that now. We are having a lot of very positive engagements with the IMF on it. We have come up with approaches that will address the 3 fundamental challenges to it. They are technical. One is to be sure that the reserve asset quality is maintained for the SDR, because that's very important. It's a reserve asset. The second one is the credit quality, and the other one, so you can't lose it, okay? And the other one is that accountability, which is more the liquidity part. When they need it, they can get it back. And we have the solutions for that. My teams were all at the IMF. Our chief economist is here. The vice president of finance from the bank was there. And they had excellent discussions. We've had positive indications from the UK government that UK government would provide SDRs to the African Development Bank. We are discussing with other governments. We are having positive engagements with Japan on this particular issue. We're discussing with other countries as well on it. So I think I want to just thank President Macron for continuing to be the leader and the face in pushing for this rechanneling of SDRs to African countries. And African heads of state asked for $100 billion of SDRs to be rechanneled to Africa. So we are making good progress on it. I think people are realizing more that we can leverage these SDRs rather than just simply sitting as dormant assets on the balance sheet of central banks. Now, we're talking about it here. Infrastructure, power, water, roads, hospitals, everything. It needs money. So if we got the SDRs, $100 billion we channeled to Africa, and some of it through multilateral developing banks like ourselves, so that we can multiply it and provide it in a capillary way to all the financial institutions here and outside. Maybe we should consider modifying or changing the name of the SDR. It's not instead of a special drawing right. Why can't you call it supporting development revitalization? Because when I go around Africa and people talk to me about SDR, sometimes they think it's a political party. But that way, SDRs will work for the ordinary people that's actually there. And so we're making good progress. And I want to thank IMF for those discussions and thank the other partners, the countries that have said they're going to support us. I am quite positive that we will get there.
Right, ladies and gentlemen, we're drawing close to the end of the press conference, but just one quick small question for Tadesse is around trade. What needs to be done to accelerate trade across Africa? What needs to be done to make sure the African Free Continental Trade Area really moves at speed?
I'll try to keep it very simple. Trade requires multiple things to be in place. We've all been talking about infrastructure. Infrastructure is for trade. That's been under construction for several decades now. We're making more and more progress. But on the back of infrastructure, what's very important is we boost the industrialization and economic diversification thrusts that will help ensure that different countries, different regions within Africa are producing diversified goods that will be demanded across borders, so that everybody's not producing tea and coffee and you expect everybody to trade in that. On the back of that, of course, is financial trade facilitation, what both ourselves and AfriExim do, as well as ITFC, which is also very committed to Africa. So there's multiple things that need to be done. It's infrastructure, it's diversification, it's industrialization, and trade facilitation through finance.
I wanted, okay, Sonbol, go on. No, just you are very attractive topic to me, I guess. No, I think the CFTA, or the African CFTA, is a very important, really, tool for also to enhance integration in Africa. And once you enhance integration, trade will be coming more smoothly, and I think that we should really now do all what we can to support really the implementation of this very important agreement, which in our view will change really the face of Africa and make it more and more use of its own resources and be able to really to benefit. This is the largest agreement since the establishment of the WTO, and I think it's the most diverse as well. So let's really benefit from this, because and I'm sure that all the partners are really supporting the CFTA, and hopefully that we will see good results after the the adjustment period, inshallah.
Thank you. You want to add something, Dr. Deshina?
Well, I think, are you closing?
After this, we will close.
Oh, okay. Well, it's just basically to say that I am very optimistic about Africa. Yes. We are optimistic about Africa. And I just want to let you know that there are no projects today in Africa that are so big that we are afraid of doing. None. Right here is the financial muscle of financial institutions in Africa. There's no project today that can come to Africa that's bigger than our financial power to do. That's new. And that's what we call the baobab effect, the ability to do more than each one of us can do alone. We are coordinated around how we deploy our risk instruments. We are coordinated about how we do project development. We are coordinated about how we syndicate. We are coordinated about how we also do blended finance to be able to reduce the cost. We are also coordinated about how we engage with countries. This is never seen before. It's a very different way of working in the financial ecosystem for Africa. So we are not afraid of anything when it comes to Africa today. This is a more different financial ecosystem for Africa. We are confident, we are committed. And I just want to tell the investors that we will work together to make it work. Just yesterday, or was it yesterday, 2 days ago? Was it yesterday morning? Yesterday morning, we had a breakfast session with the presidents and the partners that are here. And people may think, oh, you know, presidents are just having breakfast. No, in fact, we were busy working and thinking for ourselves, what are the bigger things that we should do together? And I think President Smala was talking about that, but I will tell you so you can hold us accountable for it. That's what they call transparency. We agreed among ourselves right here that we will push 3 big things for next year. 1, when it comes to agriculture, that we agree that we will work collectively together to support the special agro-industrial processing zones across Africa. We are doing quite a lot in that. We have a lot of work being done by ARISE that is supported by the Africa Finance Corporation. You've got Africa 50 with power to do project development and deploy finance. You've got Trade Development Bank. You have Islamic Development Bank. You have European Development Bank. You have Development Bank of South Africa and others. Everywhere we are, we want to turn around agriculture in Africa into a wealth sector. That we will have special zones that are dedicated only to agro-industrialization on the continent. So we can turn all of our rural areas away from being zones of economic misery to zones of economic prosperity. We can develop value chains that will add value to every single thing that Africa produces. We will change the face of rural Africa and turn them into new economic zones with our collective effort. We committed ourselves to that. The second thing we committed ourselves to is around the future of electric cars, I think. Yes. Yeah. We ask ourselves the question, the minerals that we need. The Africa Finance Corporation has done a brilliant work to look at the value chains for battery minerals. So whether you're talking about nickel, cobalt, or lithium ion, we then ask ourselves the question, do we want Africa to repeat the same mistakes again? Exporting these raw materials outside to the rest of the world as people drive nice cars that is actually powered by electricity, and yet the people that actually have them are literally poor. And we said, no. That what we will do is that we will put our resources together, technical resources in terms of technical assessment, our project development capacity here, our co-financing capacity here with others, to be able to develop value chains for lithium-ion batteries, right? Yes. In the continent, and also attract investors to actually do manufacturing of electric cars on our continent. That's the second thing that we agreed collectively that we will do. You can begin to see how we work that's very different. The third thing we agreed that we are going to do that is different was around renewable energy. Yeah, we have the Desert to Power, which is being led by the African Development Bank and other partners, which is a $20 billion investment to help to build 10,000 megawatts of solar all across 11 countries, the Sahelian zones of Africa, that will provide electricity for 250 million people. Now, the question is this. We've already started that in Mali, in Chad, in Burkina Faso, and we continue to do that. And a great partner of ours is the Agence Française de Développement on that. But we asked ourselves yesterday the question. There is over-concentration of solar panel manufacturing in the world. So as Africa tries to maximize and optimize the renewable energy that it has, which is solar is what we have a lot of. We have 11 terawatts of solar, we have it. But if the production and the manufacturing of solar panels were to collapse for some reason, we all see what has happened in the world for COVID. We saw it happen to food. Africa will be stuck. So we decided collectively that we will support, look into designing, support, and planning for the manufacturing of polysilicons in Africa, in which Africa will begin to be a center also to manufacture its own solar panels in Africa. Now, everybody's here, so it's all in the name of transparency, nothing here. We committed ourselves to that. And that's why I just want to give you the assurance that this is a different way of working together as financial institutions in Africa. We take on big things. We are not scared of big things. We will put our hands together around them, and we will continue to push to advance Africa's development with all of the resources and instruments that we can develop. So thank you very much. You can look forward to progress on this, that we will sit on this table next year and give you a report back on that. So if my partners don't mind, we stand, we hold our hands like a baobab tree and demonstrate that we're going to do that.
Okay, as they do that, members of the press, photographers come in front.
Okay, let's go.
So as they do that, let me just run through quick thanks. I would like to thank the President of the African Development Bank Group, Dr. Akiwumi Adesina. A big thanks to Professor Benedito Rama. He's already left from Exim Bank. We've got Vivekanandan from the Development Bank of Southern Africa. We've got Ismail Zubeiru, African Finance Corporation. Elaine Ebobise from Africa 50. We've got Desed Masu, President Emeritus and CEO of Trade and Development Bank. We've got Hani Saleh Sonbol from the Islamic Development Bank. Last but not least, we've got Musa Nakolima from a European Investment Bank and the Senior Director of Africa Investment Forum, Chinelu Anohu. And if you can, guys, if you can photograph us, if you want to come in front, take your last shot, and then after this, join Mr. President. President Adesina is going to the plenary for his panel. Please, we can all move there after this. Thank you.
You want me to take the mic? Thank you very much for saying that.
Thank you, sir.